In the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, the Township of Woodbridge initiated and/or participated in various federal, state, county, and local government and private sector programs designed to assist resident property and business owners to recover from the devastating effects of the storm and to prevent continued recurring property loss as a result of storm-related disasters. The Township continues to connect flood victims with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and other assistant agencies. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection Blue Acres program has purchased 139 residential properties located within Woodbridge's flood hazard area, residential properties that were severely damaged as a result of Sandy flooding. The Township continues to explore any and all initiatives that will assist flood victims and reduce the financial burden of purchasing mandatory flood insurance policies from the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP. The Township has applied to participate in the Community Rating System, a FEMA-sponsored program that recognizes and encourages community floodplain management and planning that exceeds the minimum requirements of the NFIP. The CRS program awards such activities as by discounting flood insurance premiums for all policyholders within a participating community, including those who were acquired by their mortgage agreement to purchase flood insurance. One component of the CRS is the Program for Public Information, a public information and outreach initiative that identifies, prepares, implements, and monitors a range of public information activities that address local flooding issues in accordance with community needs. I would like to thank you for your participation in the Woodbridge Township PBI Committee. The work of the PPI Committee is a huge first step toward achieving our goals of reducing flood insurance premiums for township flood policyholders. So again, what this really means is that we can take certain steps as a township and present them to FEMA, and as a result of the things we've done, the residents of Woodbridge Township will correspondingly pay less in flood insurance. I think it's very important for us. People that have to have flood insurance have, in most cases, already been through storms and seen great damage. And it's a very expensive proposition. In many cases, the flood insurance is more than homeowners insurance. In some cases, the flood insurance can almost be more than property taxes. That's how much it costs. I want to thank Dr. Joe DiLorenzo from the Jerian Associates. He is our resident expert. This guy forgot more about floods than I'll ever know. Other than Mike Gellan, most of us will never be able to understand much of what he says, but it's a challenge sitting talking to him in a meeting. But he is brilliant when it comes to these rules. He knows, frankly, I think more than the people in the federal government, and it's good to have him on our team. We also have Mike Flynn, who joined us a couple of years ago in the mayor's office and quickly saw an opportunity in the engineering department to move over, and he is a certified floodplain manager. Pretty important, pretty impressive credential. I don't know any certified floodplain managers except Mike. Tom Flynn, why did I say Mike Flynn? Tom Flynn. I know Mike Flynn. So Tom's been great. So Tom has learned a lot from Joe, and between the two of them, they literally know exactly what we have to do and how we have to do it, and they've been a great team. Of course, Mike Gellan's on this committee. He's our new engineer, joined us almost a year ago, and he jumped right into this whole issue. I want to recognize Brooke Maslow from Rutgers. We engaged Rutgers several years ago to work with us on how to bring back the flood area, the Watson-Crampton flood area, to something productive, and she's been tremendous, as has Rutgers, putting passive recreation down there and just making it look better for the residents that are still there, and for all of Woodbridge Township to use the recreational areas. The rest of you on the committee are business people from Woodbridge Township. Our two council people that are affected most by the flooding, in the First Ward, Nancy Drum, and the Third Ward, Corey Spiller. They're giving of their time to be here on this committee. Pat Kenny, of course, runs our Office of Emergency Management, so operationally, he's able to be the liaison to know exactly what happens when it floods, because he's the guy out there saving people and making sure they get the help they need. So we have a great mix of people on this committee. And it's just tremendous that we have such talent, and I want to thank everybody for serving. It's a bit of an effort. You know, it's not the kind of committee you can take lightly. You're going to have to pay attention to these guys and try to figure out what Dr. Joe's saying. It's not easy. He uses a lot of acronyms and a lot of initials, but don't be afraid to stop him and ask him to explain what the heck he means, because we don't hesitate when he's talking to us in the conference room. But we've learned a lot. We're doing a lot. It's all for the residents of Woodbridge Township to save you money. So all these people here are working for all of you out there. So thank you all for watching, and thank you all for serving.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'd like to introduce the committee to one another, and I will just go down the lane here, we have Brooke Maslow, who is, let me see, is PhD Assistant Professor, Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Natural Resources at Rutgers University. Did I get it right? Okay, very good. Rich McDermott is Vice President, Director of Reverse Mortgages, Investors Bank. He is the local financial services bank representative on the committee. Next up, we have Amy Balisano. Amy is the Vice President of Marketing, General Properties, Woodbridge Center Mall, and she is the major employer representative for the committee. Nancy Drum is Councilwoman, Ward 1, Woodbridge Township. Michael Gellan, who's, that whether he knows it or not, he's the ad hoc chair of the committee, is a PECME CPWM Woodbridge Township engineer. What's that mean? That means all good stuff. Then we have Corey Spiller, who is a councilman. He is in Ward 3, Avenel, and he is also the Port Reading Avenel Fire Commissioner, so that puts him in a unique position to represent not only the folks of Avenel, but also the fire district as well. We have Bernadette M. Solar, Vice President, Corporate Affairs, Middlesex Water Company. She's the utility company representative. Maria Portales, who is not here at the moment, is a farmers insurance group, and she's also a member of the Woodbridge Township Zoning Board, which is why she's here, and she will be our insurance agency representative. Bob Durso is a broker associate with J.J. Ellick Realty, and he will be the real estate agency representative, followed by Chief Patrick Kenny. He's the Woodbridge Township Office of Emergency Management, Emergency Response Representative. So as you heard the mayor, you're here to try to put together the information that everybody's going to present to you as part of the process that we're making applications in the CRS with FEMA in order to reduce insurance rates for our residents when it comes to flood insurance. This is the initial meeting. This is the stakeholder meeting wherein we are asking you to become informed. We are going to have presentations which will tell you the scope of the problem from the Superstorm Sandy storm, what followed, and up to Brooke Maslow, where we're now into the area trying to remediate the flood zone area into passive recreation and other forms of naturalists that makes it a very nice, acceptable place to be. So as we go forward, the next meeting will have public participation. We will do an outreach to members of the public that reside in the flood zone areas, invite them to the meeting, let them know where we are, what we're coming to, what our goals are, and where we're headed. And then we'll have a final meeting where you as the committee will present your recommendations, again, to the public. Tom and Dr. Joe will indeed be working very diligently to put together those recommendations for your final meeting. So I see a series of 2 more meetings coming up between now and next June. So it's not going to be an awful lot of time spent for you, but we are going to give you a lot of information that you're going to have to digest and take it from there. So at this point, we're going to go to Dr. Joe, and he's going to begin the process of telling you where we are and what we're doing. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, John, and thanks for coming out tonight. I'd like to just spend a few minutes to give you a quick overview of some of the flood hazards in Woodbridge, just a basis for what we're doing. Oh, sorry. And then talk about some of the Blue Acres acquisition programs that's going on. And then we'll get into CRS, what the town's doing, quickly give you an overview of the program for public information and outreach that we're doing here, and then we'll lead into a group discussion where we can try to get some of your input. So basically there are 2 types of flooding that are a big hazard in Woodbridge. There's tidal flooding and there's fluvial flooding. I'll start off with tidal, we'll talk about fluvial later. Tidal flooding is caused by 2 types of coastal storms: hurricanes, tropical storms, and extratropical storms, otherwise known as nor'easters. Tropical storms are warm core systems formed in tropics, you all know that. They get their energy from evaporation from the warm ocean. The thing about tropical storms and hurricanes that's particularly important is that they can have very high winds in what's called a radius of curvature. So when the storm makes landfall, just picture this tropical cyclone rotating counterclockwise and translating towards the coast. The strongest winds tend to be on the eastern side, and there's a core, a radius, it's called the radius of maximum winds, typically about 10 to 20 miles wide, where you can have extremely high winds, very high water levels. And it's pretty much a worst case scenario when they strike land. Now, fortunately, in New Jersey, we've been very fortunate. If you look at the storm tracks for tropical storms and hurricanes back to 1850, NOAA has compiled them all, and as you can see, primarily they skirt the coast. Most of the storms that made landfall in Carolina, in the Cape, Carolinas, Long Island, direct landfall. New Jersey, they tend to skirt the coast with a radius of maximum winds tending to be offshore. So we've been lucky, and that's not to say that it won't happen in the future. You could bet it will, or it hasn't happened in the past. But for the past 167 years, we've been very fortunate because no Category 2 or higher hurricane has made its way into this area. There's anecdotal information that in 1821 there was a storm that went along the path that's now the Garden State Parkway. So it certainly could happen, but we've been fairly lucky. But again, you're most unlucky if you're in that spot of the radius of maximum winds. Extratropical storms, nor'easters, are not spawned in the tropics. Generally, they come from a variety of places shown here. They're cold core systems, and they're formed when there's a large dip in the jet stream and large temperature differences and instabilities with a strong jet stream above. They tend to be much larger in scale than tropical storms. They can occupy the whole east coast and pile up water for days because of the rotation of the earth. To the right of the wind, they tend to pile up water. And what's really dangerous is if you have a situation where there's typically a high pressure system in Canada that blocks the passage and it stalls 2 or 3 days, and that's when we get the most intense nor'easters. And then there's Superstorm Sandy. Superstorm Sandy is what's called an extratropical transition storm. It started out as a late season hurricane tropical storm, got absorbed by a large nor'easter, and what happened is there was a high pressure system off the coast, and it, on a full moon tide, made a left turn right into New Jersey. So it was, in terms of water surface elevations, it's as bad as you could imagine. And if you look at the records of peak tides since 1910, recorded by NOAA at Sandy Hook, Superstorm Sandy reached about 11.5 feet above mean sea level. Whereas the previous most severe storms, the 92 nor'easter, Hurricane Donna in 1960, Tropical Storm Irene in 2011, that second tier was about 3.5 feet lower. So you have this most extreme event, Sandy, this other second tier, and to put this in perspective, the lowest areas in the streets in Woodbridge typically might be, say, 4 or 5 feet at the end of the streets. So just picture the inundation. You have some areas where the grade is about elevation 6 or 7 in town, and you're up there at Sandy. In Woodbridge, it's about 10% higher than Sandy Hook. So when you see 11.5 here, it actually reached 12.5 in Woodbridge during Sandy. And likewise, in these other storms, it reached about 1 foot higher, about elevation 9. So you have a real inundation problem during these most severe events. And what doesn't bode well for the future is if you look at these top 10 recorded storm tides, they're all from 1960 onward. So you don't see any of the top 10 back there. And this is a rendering of the USGS's projection of what would be the inundation area for Sandy. And you know pretty well, you could see Warren pretty much underwater, and to the Port Reading section, the whole lower Woodbridge River area, right up into Woodbridge proper and Avenel, all the way up. See, here's the ideal manufactured home park split there. And so up to elevation 12.5 covers quite an expanse of the town. And with that quick overview of tidal flooding, now we'll spend a couple minutes about Blue Acres Restoration Program.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you everyone for coming out today. This is really, really important for the township. So we're going to spend just a few minutes now talking about the Blue Acres program, floodplain restoration, and then we'll get more into why you're here and the importance of the opinions from all you guys. So the Blue Acres program, if you're not familiar with it, it's a subsection of the Green Acres program. So it was monies that was reallocated in order to help remove structures from flood-prone areas. And in doing so, restore them to their natural functions. So, like we talked about earlier, there were around 140 homes removed from the Blue Acres area. Over half of them were repetitive wall structures, and we'll define what that means later in the meeting. But really, what it means is that this is an area of town that we've known for a long time is at risk, and unfortunately, Sandy showed us that. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit with Brooke because she's heading up our restoration efforts. But really, what we're talking about is helping people escape from harm's way and restoring these ecological benefits. This is a plan that was developed by Dr. Brooke Maslin and her team. And with that, I'll segue to Brooke just for a couple minutes.
Sure.
Do you want to keep the slide up?
Sure.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm wearing two hats today. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, as Tom said, basically there's two main objectives to this plan. The first one is, helping people escape from harm's way. But really for us, it's about restoring the ecological function of the floodplain that existed prior to development, right? So the way we do that specifically is through stormwater mitigation and flood storage, increasing the flood storage capacity of these areas. And then in doing so, right, recognizing the fact that there are still a significant portion of residential neighborhoods surrounding this, right? So how do we do that in a way that can support enhancing the public amenity, right, and increasing passive restoration? So in 2015, we partnered with the township and we developed this open space and floodplain restoration plan. And I don't know, do we have this map up as well?
We can just point it out.
We can point to that one? Okay. Sorry. So we targeted 5 general portions of Woodbridge at large. It totals about 150 acres of former residential lot and publicly owned space. So we have some small portions in Colonia and Avenel, and then we have areas in Port Reading, Seawarren, and Watson-Crampton. Right now, the biggest area that we're working in is the Watson-Crampton neighborhood. It's about 75 acres total of potential restoration area. And again, that's made up of a mosaic of former residential properties, so the Blue Acres parcels, and then portions of salt marsh and degraded woodlands and things like that. So the idea is to incorporate all of that together for restoration. So again, we want to do this in a way that is amenable to the residents that are staying. So we're restoring various habitats that would be existing in the floodplain and in a functioning floodplain. Some things would be forest, so something with high vegetative structure. There's other areas that have marsh edge, right, meadows, and we have some shrublands and things too. So the idea is to remove the impervious cover, right, because that's where water doesn't infiltrate. Remove turf and lawn, because that's the second worst thing in terms of water infiltration. And replace those habitats, or replace those with functioning habitats. So if you look here, we have a cross-section of what we might expect in one of these Blue Acres areas. So here we have an existing residential property. We recognize, again, that we want to have some kind of visual buffer or physical separation between the residential area and the natural area, the restoration area. So we do have, it's a variable buffer, but an area of about 10 feet or so that's mowed fairly consistently. Within that buffer zone, we're planting larger native street trees, again, to provide that physical separation between the two areas. And then what you can see as you go across this cross-section is we start out with meadow habitat, so areas where you might put in some trails and things. That's lower vegetation, lower structure, so people don't feel closed in. And then as you transition into the higher vertical structure, right? So you have areas that are going to be flood storage with shrub habitat, bioswales, and then eventually ending into this floodplain woodland restoration habitat. So these are just two sort of general renditions of both of those. In terms of implementation so far, we've done just about a year of implementation. So we've installed about 3 acres of meadow habitat. This past fall, we went in and removed a lot of 25 species of invasive plants in all of the degraded habitats that are in existence in the Watson-Crampton neighborhood. And then we planted about 1,000 native trees and shrubs with some partners, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the New Jersey Tree Foundation. And so we're going to continue to implement these things as we go through, not just in the Watson-Crampton area, but in Colonia Avenue, Fort Reading, all of the other areas that are part of the Blue Acres. I think that's about what I've got. Yeah. Sure.
Great. And also this past year, the New Jersey Association of Floodplain Managers awarded the township for the floodplain restoration efforts for Dr. Maslow's work. So it's being recognized all over the state, just for how progressive the township is. So we just wanted to transition a little bit now into, that was the big picture of, kind of how we got here, right? And this is where we're going. So now we're going to talk a little bit about entry into the Community Rating System program and the subset of that, which is the Program for Public Information, which is why we're all here. So flood insurance premiums in the town, as you can see, we have the greatest number of policies in Middlesex County and the second highest average premium. So, just to reiterate a bit what the mayor said earlier, financially this program is really important for the township. And here's a slide which specifically shows, so getting back into the CRS program basically means that we have to prove to FEMA and the state that we're in full compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program, all the state standards. So we've updated our flood damage prevention ordinance. We've made some changes internally, and essentially we're going to now put this information forward and say that we would like to move our class from a class 10, as you can see, which receives no discount, up to as high as we can go. We're going to shoot high. So for each class improvement, you can see that the rates, the discounts rather, increase substantially. And right, so it's reducing flood insurance costs, but it's also making the town more resilient. So these programs aren't just about saving money; it's about a holistic approach to floodplain management, and that's really, I think, echoes everything that everyone has already said. And right, so now on to why we're here, what the Program for Public Information is. So we're going to talk a little bit now about forming what's called a PPI document. That's going to be the material that this committee forms. The next step would then be to draft a formal document and submit that for a resolution to the township. So our step 1 is complete, which is great. So we got one step down. We formed our committee. And this is just an overview of the next steps. So now we're going to assess our information needs. We're going to talk a little bit about formulating messages. The CRS and FEMA like to see 6 priority messages, so we can go over those, identify outreach projects, examine anything else that's going on in the state, if we can piggyback on anything, we don't want to duplicate anything, and like I said, prepare a PPI document. And as John Haggerty pointed out earlier, that'll be down the road, but we'll work internally and make sure that all the opinions that are expressed here today get on that draft. So like I said, step 1, we formed our committee. Thank you all again for coming out. We can't stress enough how important this is. So step 2, so we're going to assess our information needs. So where should we focus our PPI outreach? And, some examples, flood-prone neighborhoods, recently flooded areas, repetitive loss areas, and any area that's possibly not mapped into a FEMA floodplain that we're aware of locally. So we can just talk a little bit now, kind of about some ideas around. As everyone can see now, there's a lot of areas in town where there are floodplains. There's a big map to the left over here, but you can just kind of get a feeling that it's not just the Lost and Crampton area, right? It's we have floodplains in just about every area of Woodbridge Township. So, does anyone have any ideas about what other neighborhoods that we haven't talked about yet today, besides the Lost and Crampton area, where we might want to start to think about doing some outreach and where folks might need to be a little bit more educated about these topics? Yes?
Colonia.
Absolutely, yeah. Colonia, so Mike said Colonia. Yeah, there's quite a few floodplains in Colonia. The South Branch of the Broadway River.
Parts of Islam.
Parts of Islam, yeah, the Metro Park area.
Barbacoa,
Yep.
Seawarren.
The Colonia section you have, is that the McFarland,
Yep.
North Hill,
Yep.
that whole area?
and also by Inman Library too. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Amherst.
Great.
Are you talking, I'm sorry. Are they talking primarily about geographic locations or audiences?
Right now, we're just focusing on the actual locations. We'll get into the audiences and what to expect there.
Because you have drainage coming from high school.
Right.
Which when that gets backed up, starts to flood out the entire high school.
Right. And feel free to just yell out, guys. This is the part of the meeting where we really appreciate your attendance. So if you can think of anything that we haven't already thought of, all these comments will go into our PPI document. So we listed a few neighborhoods that are prone to tidal flooding up here. Dr. Joe outlined them pretty well.
So I just have a question.
Go for it.
Is there an opportunity for residents to say, I have problems? What's their?
That's going to be part of the next meeting that we have. There will be an aggressive public outreach to the residents that reside in the flood zone areas throughout the town. So we will probably be using the Code Red emergency notification system to advise of the public meeting, because I can very directly target those flood zone residential areas through the Code Red program. We'll also consider doing a direct mail to the residents in those areas as well, and also obviously I'll be posting notices on TV 35, webpage, and other types of outreach. Probably even considering advertising in the Home News Tribune of a public meeting scenario. So yes, that's part 2 of the process. We wanted to get all of you folks acclimated, get together, get you to understand what our issues and concerns are, and then we go to step 2, which we will do the public outreach. Hopefully public will come, they will let us know their particular stories, their particular concerns, and we'll be able to let them know what we're trying to accomplish here, which ultimately is going to be the reduction of their flood insurance policies, which they're all going to have. So that's where we're headed, and that's why we want to get everybody up to speed to start off with. There's not a lot that we can do interactively at the moment, but I felt it was important to have everybody together so we understand the nature of the issue and the problems.
Question, so are these all the areas that have been identified today?
No, we're going to show you
We're going to come
specific
to,
area.
okay, got it.
Right.
Perhaps if Dr. Joe or Tom can explain what FEMA requires from the town in order to be CI certified.
That would be Dr. Joe.
Well, it's a document about that thick, but in any case, getting back to this idea, roughly about 19% of the town is in FEMA's special flood hazard area. So it's not one little isolated area, it's everywhere. And step 2 of this PPI process is to assess target areas for this outreach program and the target audience. So first, again, on the tidal flooding areas, I just numbered here very generally some well-known flood-prone areas from tidal and combined tidal and fluvial flooding. There's that Crampton-Watson area neighborhood that you heard about between Herdsbrook and Wedgewood Brook. Wedgewood Brook. There's, going up here, I have the Ideal Manufactured Home Park. You can see it here. And then going up into Avenel here in section 4, you have what I call the Blandford-Borman Avenue neighborhood. But it's basically all along the upper reaches of the Woodbridge River. And then, in addition, there are these 2 neighborhoods south of the Turnpike that are prone to flooding. One of them is called, I called it the Vernon Street, Seward Avenue neighborhood, and also the Austin Street, South Roberts area. So these 2 below the Turnpike, and then all the way out to Port Reading, you have East 4th Street neighborhood over there. So these are just some of the main areas, but there are isolated pockets where there are homes that are flooded fairly regularly in addition to these general areas. So the second step, again, is to find the target audience for these programs, these projects, these outreach projects that we're planning here. What areas? Well, flood-prone areas are the obvious areas, and people that reside in them, but there are also other stakeholders involved that you want to reach out to. And that's, this is something out for the committee even right now. Think about who should a program for public information be targeted for, any and all and more. And also, are there any other ongoing outreach programs that you know of? Certainly the town has a website and a newsletter, but in addition, are there any other outreach programs that you want to try to work with those? So we could talk about this now or later, but you see where we're going with this. It's an important step 2 of the PPI process. And just getting back to this whole idea of CRS, you can, depending on how many activities you do, you can qualify for more discounts, different levels in the CRS. So we're going to try to do as much as we can, and that's one of the reasons we're doing a planning project here, is you get more credits. So we're doing a program for public information. There's also a floodplain management plan that would garner a lot of extra points and get the town not only to be more flood resilient, but to have much lower flood insurance rates. So we're going there.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So at the end of the day, our goal is to put forth whatever we need to do to try to get our residents to have lower rates.
That's one goal.
One goal.
And to make them more protected, more resilient to flood.
Especially after Sandy and Irene, me personally, I've heard a lot of myths, facts, whatever they might be, whether you're in a flood zone, you're not in a flood zone. You can get insurance, you can't get insurance. You're not in a flood zone, so you have to purchase additional, all that stuff. You have one house already, you can't get insurance for your shore house, whatever it might be. The premium that you showed, the average of $4,300, is that for a person on top of their additional homeowners?
Yes, it's
Wow.
separate. It's a separate policy. It's pretty substantial.
That's exactly why we're here, because the flood insurance rates for those people that are required to have flood insurance are astronomical. And they're going to increase as we go forth. There are measures in Congress right now which will increase the insurance rates for the flood insurance program. Additionally, FEMA has identified flood zones that will include far more people than currently. So that's one of our other issues that we're facing, is that if the federal government approves the process of mapping, it will extend the flood zones far into neighborhoods that currently do not have flood issues, nor are they required to carry flood insurance. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve with this by identifying those areas and reducing the flood zone. Remember, flood insurance is required for any homeowner in a flood zone that carries a mortgage. If you don't carry a mortgage, if your home is paid off, then it's an option for you. But by and large, most of the folks in our flood zones are mortgaged. So
And they
they're
need
going
that
to be
they're
required.
required to have it.
Right, so what we gain here today by going through this process can be very, very beneficial and huge to those residents that require flood insurance. So we're going to get there. We have already, as you know, through my office, we have the newsletter, we have the website, we have the Code Red program. We have a plethora of ways to reach our target audience. So we're just trying to bring you guys together to let you know where we're going, and then you can kick back your thoughts and process as we go through the next couple of meetings. Again, I don't see the next meeting until sometime March, April, and then hopefully we'll have the final meeting with recommendations that you will present to the mayor's office and to our flood zone folks what those recommendations will be. And we'll get you there. That's the whole process. But I needed to put together a committee of very specific individuals representing very specific commercial and public business interests in this township. So that's where we are and where we're headed and why we're going there.
Thank you, sir.
John, just a question. So we're identifying recipients of these messages, but if you could pick the top 3 messages that you want to convey, what would they be? And I think that might help us to add to this list of...
Certainly. The top messages are without a doubt, you are a resident in a flood zone. You are required to carry flood insurance. Therefore, you need to know that the town is working very diligently to try to reduce that and to limit your financial liability through flood insurance programs. Secondarily, we're working to try to make sure that the residents that are potentially going to be considered to be in a flood zone, if FEMA passes legislation in the next couple of years, which extends the flood zone map. Joe can explain this a little bit better, but they're called preliminary firms. And there are maps out there that go well beyond what we already have as a flood zone. And they go into neighborhoods that'll take you back into here perhaps. And it will totally target literally thousands of new resident households that may have to be getting flood insurance into future. So we want to let you know that we're trying to work with the federal FEMA and to hopefully we have already filed opposition to the preliminary maps that have been done for Woodbridge and take us to areas far beyond where we currently are, and Joe can explain that very succinctly, very quickly. And so that's where we're going. Those are my 2 primary missions for you as a committee, and we will provide to you all of the information, the background that you're going to need to formulate whatever thought process that you wish to formulate. And we'll be doing that going forward.
So are these blue areas, are those all the houses that are required to have flood insurance?
No.
Okay, I mean, that would be interesting for me to see, like,
Yeah,
Yes, just so everybody knows, the new flood maps, the firms were supposed to be out over a year and a half ago. And because New York City has appealed the new flood maps, we have gotten a little reprieve, and I know they're working on the new maps now. That's probably where Dr. Joe can talk to you better.
Do a real quick rundown.
The new maps, the effective maps extend the special flood hazard area, the 100-year coastal floodplain, to elevation 9. Okay? The new maps would have extended it to elevation 12 or 13, 3 or 4 feet higher, and expanding to that area, which was roughly the Sandy inundation area. So it would have encompassed a bigger area. And so it would cause a substantial burden to those people that have basements in those expanded areas because they would be rated on the lowest level of their home, well below the base flood, 100-year flood elevation. Another factor in Woodbridge, why flood insurance is so expensive, is because about 3/4 of the homes were built before the flood insurance rate maps were created, and they were grandfathered rates. And now FEMA's taking them off the grandfathered rates and bringing them up to the actuarial rates step by step each year, and so they're going up very quickly. So that's contributing.
So Joe, what Amy mentioned from the previous map,
Those are blue?
and those are blue from the previous, they are in the flood zone. If you don't have a mortgage, you're not required to have a flood insurance. But if you do have a mortgage, like John said, you are required.
You're required to purchase flood insurance.
Tom can show on this map the different elevations.
Right, so this map shows the green delineates the effective flood insurance rate map. Currently. And the pink shows the new parcels that are newly mapped into the 2014 preliminary FEMA flood insurance rate map. So you can see, they expand, it significantly expands the flood zones into new neighborhoods by, sometimes 3, 4, 5 blocks. So like
In many of those instances, those neighborhoods have never been flooded. But now, going forward, they would be required to have flood insurance if these new maps are adopted by Congress.
And I'm sorry, if they're adopted by Congress, let's say tomorrow, and whether it takes 60 days by whatever, these people or residents are going to get a letter in the mail stating.
They're not going to get a letter from the township or the mayor, but they're going to get a letter.
They're going to get a letter from
usually from their mortgage holder. Their mortgage holder would tell them you are now required to have flood insurance. So
Because the federal government won't tell them that the maps are in place. It's when their insurance company gets told, okay, now they're in the flood zone, now they're going to be notified from their insurance company and say, hey, now you're in a flood zone, you have a mortgage, you have to have flood insurance, here's what your premium, then they're going to go looking for their premiums, and they're going to be skyrocketing. And I know the town, back from Sandy, we started talking about this formula, trying to get into it. There's only one other town in the county of Middlesex that's actually gotten into it right now, and that's South River.
And by way of example, right after FEMA put out the preliminary maps back in 2014, there were some estimations that folks would be paying upwards of $30,000 for flood insurance. I mean, it's just that outrageous, but that's where we're headed, and that's why we're doing what we're doing today.
But I would think if you're in that pink area, it's going to have major impact on your ability to sell your home.
Absolutely.
Whenever you're in the flood zone.
Quick question, has anybody in Woodbridge as of yet experimented with raising the house as they do in the...
That's interesting.
They have?
Yep, we have houses that are
Because-
raised in the Watson area, actually, where people, they don't want to leave. With that, looking at the new maps, we required them to
Yeah.
go up to 13 feet. It used to be, I think it was 10, Mike? We were at 10 at one time?
9.
9,
One, yeah.
where a gentleman actually, during Hurricane Irene, got flooded. He brought his house up to 9. He brought it up to 10. He went a foot over.
Yeah, but then Sandy came.
Then Sandy came, and his house got flooded again, and they said, all right, now you need to go to 13. Well, he basically sold in Blue Acres, and that house that was raised brand new was torn down and got rid of.
Because in banking, that's something with our lending department, they got to do a full research on everything and look at the different zones, what zone you're this, it's that. And also, too, one of the things, the option is raise your house, but depending on where you're at, so with insurance, they're going to dictate how far you have to go up. And like you're saying, people don't realize that they did it after Irene, it's a whole new playing field after Sandy.
They
It's
still had to go back
expensive.
up.
It's very expensive.
The beauty of where we are now through the Blue Acres program is that we've had 139 properties removed from the high-risk flood area, primarily in Woodbridge proper, in the Watson-Crampton area. And that has taken a whole host of residential families out of that area, which allows Brooke to do what she's doing, so that if there is a next storm, and there will be a next storm, as Dr. Joe said, that there will be fewer properties that will be impacted, and that our resiliency and our ability to deal with those floodwaters will be a little bit better because we have done some environmental science that really looks to treat that particular problem. So we're trying to capture results on both ends here. And the good thing is that Blue Acres, and we aggressively pursued Blue Acres to get those families out of there.
I just wanted to add too, just for one moment, I'm sorry, just a Pat's note too. So there are more towns in Middlesex County that are interested in the CRS program, and even there are so many that the county has developed a CRS users group. So that is a group that we can tap into as we start to move forward if we have questions. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
What's the question? The project that started already from that,
Watching Grantham.
where did the funds come from to finance that project?
To finance the Brooks project, when we retained Rutgers University, Township.
Okay, it's Township.
And then there was, so we secured a partnership with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. They have a partner for Fish and Wildlife program. And it's a little strange because they technically aren't supposed to work on state-owned land, which all the Blue Acres programs, that's the land
Technically is.
Right. But because Woodbridge enters into a memorandum of understanding that they have to manage the property in perpetuity, then Fish and Wildlife Service said, okay. And so they funded some of the seed, some of the 1,000 plants. They put those, they assisted in some of the Phragmites herbicide application. And they're continuing to help in the future. And then we're working, both Rutgers and Woodbridge is trying to find smaller pots of money through grants and things like that to fund some of these small projects.
Yeah, we're aggressively looking through grant programs through our grant writer and our grants office as well. But the township has budgeted funds for this particular program. Blue Acres, as a reminder, was state funded through FEMA and other federal funding agencies. So the millions of dollars that they put into buying out our 139 residents was all state and federal monies. But as a result of that, the township took on the liabilities and the responsibility of maintaining those properties, which led us to the Rutgers program and doing it that way. So,
Underneath the word bridge, that additional area of pink, is that the My Lead, Randolph area?
Right here?
No, all the way up.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
yes.
Which is all the industry.
There you go.
You've repeatedly mentioned residents. There's businesses. Are they covered in this at all? Like, are we
Absolutely.
targeting
Yes.
businesses?
Yes.
Okay. So I just would update that because I didn't see the word.
I think it was in the
Absolutely.
slide.
All I've
And
seen
that
is
can go into our
residents. So
document.
I think that needs to be clarified that you're targeting.
It was in
anyone
this slide
in
here.
those areas.
The Chamber of Commerce would be a great location
Well,
for
you
businesses.
have residents.
It says contractors and stuff.
Yeah, but
That's
business,
businesses.
Talk about, like the Chamber for business.
Yeah, you have a valid point. Businesses also.
Yeah, and that's the kind of feedback that's really important, just moving forward. And then, as we get closer, through these discussion sessions and we start talking about, what those priority messages are. So Brooke mentioned earlier, what do we want these audiences to know? And there are priority messages that we want to make sure that we get out through the way in which John made sure that we do so.
John, can you tell the group what are we shooting for? Is class what? 8 or 6 or 5?
Go back to the slide with all of the reductions for the program. There you go.
So,
The mayor wants number one.
yeah, I was gonna say, I know where he wants to be.
But realistically, I don't think any municipality in the nation has ever gotten to there or ever will. But we're looking probably 5-4 in that area.
yeah, we're going to shoot high. Most towns get in at a 9 when they, apply to get back in, but we're doing a lot of work to make sure that our application is strong. You guys on our board, that holds a lot of merit. And like we mentioned earlier, the PPI is just one component of the CRS, and as we talked about earlier, it's a multiplier. So all the other programs that we're doing the way in which we do our outreach and we think about it and all put our heads together, FEMA credits that, and they say that, you guys have really done your homework, and as a result of that, any applications that are developed as part of the PPI document, therefore create higher creditworthiness.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, the public information aspect, your committee, is just one aspect of what we're doing. We're doing engineering, we're doing all kinds of planning, that from emergency management response. All of that comes into play. It's a universe of items that form the CRS, and this is but one of those items. But interestingly, it's probably the one area that gains you the most points, and that's the community outreach aspect of it.
What's the SFHA acronym?
Special flood hazard area.
Can you tell us the schedule, what we are shooting for after the PPI? When we might expect DEP to come to town and subsequent to FEMA?
Absolutely. So our next steps, we've updated our municipal flood damage prevention ordinance. That now mirrors
You have that in your
standards.
package.
Correct. We've also identified exactly how many structures are in the special flood hazard area as per the effective maps, the preliminary maps, and structures. So importantly to note, not just residential areas, but commercial as well. We've done all that homework. We've mapped it on GIS. We've updated a lot of things internally. And now the next step is to prove that and show that to FEMA and the state. So that'll be in the next couple of months as we get through the holidays and do some outreach and let those folks know that we're there. So from that point on, once we get the blessing from FEMA and the state, then we really hit the gas, and we try to make sure we document everything that we're doing. All of Brooks' work is going to go into our application, and everything that we develop here as part of public information and outreach, which, as John mentioned, is part of a bigger project.
So what we will do for your next meeting, March, April, we will provide a report to you as to the other entities, other things that we have done to get us advancing through CRS. So you have a better understanding of all the other pieces of this puzzle that we are putting together to complete it, to get us where we want to go.
And all of those pieces are going one step higher than the minimum required by the National Flood Insurance Program. So there are many activities, whether it's outreach, whether it's floodplain management planning, whether it's increasing freeboard in town, things like that. They're all different activities that you can opt to do and gain different points to get a higher and higher level. So we're trying to do as many as we can easily implement quickly to get as far as we can initially, and then as we go on, we'll do more of the planning that will get us more points ultimately to get to a 4.
And
So,
Pat and the Office of Emergency Management are crucial to this because we have to have a county plan on response, and that county plan then is submitted to the state OEM. So there's a whole bunch of pieces that fall into this process. And so I apologize for not having that on the table for today for you. Next meeting, you will understand fully all of those other pieces that we put together to get us where we need to go. It's not just the public information outreach, it's a whole host of other items.
A question, John. Are there other towns that we can look to see what has proved effective both in a communications perspective, the tools they utilized, how they got this message in front of their audiences?
Yeah. Dr. Joe?
yeah, in fact, we have a couple of examples we're going to show you today.
And the good news is we started that process already.
Okay.
So, as we close up the meeting, we can take a look at our updated township website, which has a whole host of floodplain management activities now on it. So we've done some homework already to make sure that we hit those key areas.
Yeah, we do have, it's kind of hard to locate, but I do have a floodplain management link on the web page. You got to go into engineering and then you'll find it. But it's there and it's got the maps. It's very well populated with information, which was also one of the pieces of the puzzle that we had to do. So that page it's there, and I will move a link to it to our homepage so that people can find it much easier.
And Bernard, to answer your question, I think your town Joe had done a lot of work to get into CRIs. I think that's what she's referring to,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Saraville.
Yeah, it sounds like
People
that
that
South
have
River
more
I know,
South
but I don't
River.
know, how far along in this process they are.
Yes, we will identify those towns that have successfully done it in New Jersey, and/or are in the process of doing so.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
once you demonstrate that you're in compliance with the minimum requirements, then just by virtue of being in New Jersey,
Right.
where we have higher standards, we'll be able to get right away to 5 or 10%.
Got it, okay.
Just because we have higher standards already in New Jersey. And then every activity we do will build on that.
I mean, we can learn from people who've been through this, so.
Yeah.
We're going to try to go down that road, absolutely. Don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No,
There's some
exactly.
other things that are successfully working to get us where we need to go.
Good.
Do you have an idea of what other townships that are involved in that campaign as far as insurance for flood reasons?
No idea.
It's over there.
Research.
Is there an average number now that
I
a
don't-
Woodbridge resident would have to pay?
I don't know, Joe, is there an average number of what the township resident pays in flood insurance here?
Tom had an average before,
43.
and it's going up.
You have to remember that it's really not going to go up until those flood maps, those new maps are in place. So they can't judge until they're adopted by FEMA.
And, there is no schedule of adoption. I mean, these maps have been out since 2014, and they're still somewhere out there in the political world of Congress. And given the existing administration, who knows if they'll ever see the light of day. But you don't know.
But this is now.
Right. There's a huge move, it was called Bigger Waters. There was a huge move in Congress several years ago to raise flood insurance rates in order to fund FEMA, and most of those funding mechanisms would be impacting East Coast to benefit the Gulf Coast. So there's a disproportionality here that is also affecting the flood insurance rates. So there are the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots are looking to the haves to try to increase the rate so that there's a bigger flow of money that goes to any FEMA-related emergency situation. That's how FEMA is funded, is through flood insurance rates.
So we're going to wrap it up for tonight. We had a really good overview of where we're going to go from here. This is just the floodplain management website that I mentioned that John's going to create the shortcut to on the homepage. We took away some good notes from tonight to be able to do some homework on our end and to start to create at least an outline skeleton of what this PPI document could look like in the future. John Haggerty and I and Joe, we will start to create something for you and make sure that at our next meeting we can start to flesh out some of those ideas and have the back and forth discussion a little bit more in March or April. But thank you all so much again.